So this morning I'm going to speak about corruption, about Transparency International, Transparency International Canada, and Transparency International Armenia. As Berj mentioned, Mr. Hoktanian was unable to get here, and I know that is a loss for you. It is a loss for me, but I will, he and I have been going back and forth this week, so I should be able to say some things on his behalf. First of all, I'd like to just step back and talk about corruption. Why are we even here today? So the founder of Transparency International, Peter Eichen, in 1993, said that corruption is one of the greatest challenges of the contemporary world. It undermines good government, fundamentally distorts public policy, leads to the misallocation of resources, harms the private sector and private sector development, and particularly hurts the poor. Controlling it is only possible with the cooperation of a wide range of stakeholders in the integrity system, including, most importantly, the state, civil society, and private sector. There's also a crucial role to be played by international institutions. In 2008, the next chair of Transparency International, who is Huguette Labelle and is a Canadian, said that corruption is a primary challenge to a strong and stable global economy. Reducing it is essential to increasing the material well-being and human development of the world's most disadvantaged communities, those who live at the edge of survival. It also plays a key role in fostering democracy, global security, protecting biodiversity, and strengthening the global investment climate. So different words, same meaning, and it hasn't changed in 2014. At Transparency International, we define corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. We used to call it the abuse of public power for private gain, but it goes far beyond the government. In the initial years, we addressed grand corruption, petty corruption, money laundering, and we were also cognizant of private-to-private corruption. And grand corruption are those big amounts of money that people pay to bribe other people to get a contract. Petty corruption is a word we don't really use a lot anymore. It's mostly facilitation payments, payments that are not supposed to be paid to the customs official or to the police officers. And for the people in the countries where they pay these day in, day out, they certainly do not consider them to be petty. There also have been reports, it's very hard to prove corruption, that it has taken place, that bribes have been paid, but nonetheless, there have been studies done that have proved that these facilitation payments actually equal, in a country like Kenya, the same amount of money as grand corruption. But today, we also talk about nepotism, about patronage, about fraud, theft, political party financing, about collusion, and other types of anti-competitive behavior, and conflict of interest. These are all considered to be types of corruption. Transparency International was created in 1993 by Peter Eichen. He was at that time with the World Bank, and he was regional director of Eastern Africa and he was located in Nairobi, Kenya. And he left the World Bank because at that time, the bank refused to deal with the issue of corruption. They said it's a cultural issue, it's not an economic issue. And it wasn't until many years later when it was proven to them that 30% of the money that they pay in aid actually goes into people's pockets and not to where it's supposed to go, that they realized, yes, it's an economic issue. It started with 2 people sitting at a kitchen table in Berlin, which is where Peter Eigen was from. It now has 120 people at the International Secretariat in Berlin, and about 100 chapters formed and forming around the world, of which TI Armenia is one formed in the year 2000. Now, we're different from an organization like Amnesty International, which has offices around the world, because even though we have to abide by guidelines of TI, excuse me, I have a very bad throat today, and even though we have to be accredited every 3 years, thank you, and disaccredited. There are chapters that have lost their accreditation. We nonetheless are autonomous in facing corruption in the economic, political, social environment in which we find ourselves. So in a country like Canada, every country in the world has corruption, but it's not as evident in some countries as it is in some others. So I'm a consultant to TI Canada. We have no staff. We have a very active board, and we have a budget about $100,000. My counterpart in Bangladesh has a staff of 220 people, 5,000 volunteers throughout the country of Bangladesh, and a budget of many $million per year. Corruption is a bit more evident in Bangladesh than it is here, so it's easier to convince people to give money to support their organization. The vision of Transparency International is very simple. It's that it's a world in which government, politics, business, civil society, and the daily lives of people are free from corruption. That's simple, but it's difficult to achieve. Transparency International Canada was created in 1996. We were the first, and we remain one of the only chapters that is a true coalition of the public, private, civil society, academia, both within our membership and on our board. And our mission is to be an informed voice that promotes anti-corruption practices and transparency in Canada's governments, businesses, and society at large. What we are not is we are not investigative. We are educative. Now, my next slide had some lovely Armenian words up on it. And what I believe they say is the Transparency International Anti-Corruption Center, which is the name of TI Armenia. It also listed the address and other coordinates and the executive director's name of Mr. Verutsan Hoktanian. And he and I have met at our annual conferences over the years. You can find information about TI Armenia at transparency.am. So it's very simple. Now, some comments on corruption in Armenia are available to you on your seats. There are 2 sheets of paper. And these were prepared by Mr. Hoktanian. I'm just going to review some of his key points. That corruption in Armenia is a systemic phenomenon. It permeates all the spheres and layers of the economy, of society, of institutes and institutions. And this is due, he feels, to 2 main reasons. One is the sense of entitlement, that should be personal enrichment on the part of public service employees. And the other is the authoritarian style of decision-making in business and politics in Armenia. There are a number of obstacles to fundamentally reducing corruption in Armenia. Those are a lack of political will, a lack of the absence of autonomy in those organizations that should be fighting corruption, like the police, like the judiciary, like prosecutors, like public servants. There are loopholes in legislation, and there's poor implementation and enforcement of laws. And I'll just pause for a moment here because I'll say that in Canada, you'll find much of the same things. So don't feel that this is just Armenia that has these issues. There's limited financial, human, and technical capacity of public institutions in Armenia, non-participation in decision-making with regard to political and policy issues. There's apathy and tolerance to corruption by society. And a few of us were meeting last evening, and I was talking with one gentleman about the level of tolerance. And as has been noted by a number of us already today, corruption exists everywhere. The level of tolerance, however, in a society is different. And a country like Korea, for example, high level of tolerance. Until some dramatic corruption issue happened, people lost their lives, and they suddenly woke up to the fact that this was due to corruption. And so their level of tolerance dropped. So the level of tolerance in Armenia is quite high for corruption. And there are certain historical and cultural factors with regard to corruption. Most of the forms of corruption are apparent in Armenia. Some that he lists are grand corruption, petty corruption, political corruption, patronage, and collusion. There's a lack of trust by the public toward political institutions, particularly the parliament and the bureaucracy. And there's an insidious web of patronage networks of political and business elites in Armenia. These lead to informal cartels and monopolies, and these lead to really having an informal government which is really making the decisions in Armenia. So I invite you to read those 2 pages at your leisure, and also I know that the other presenters today will speak much more about corruption in Armenia. Since this conference is about solutions and the role of the diaspora, I wanted to introduce you to a publication of Transparency International Canada. Now, the 3rd edition of this anti-corruption compliance checklist was launched yesterday. And we decided this time we would not have a printed version. It is available on our website, which is transparency.ca. And since the link isn't up there, you just go to the home page, the right-hand side, right to the bottom, and you'll be able to link on this checklist. It's what we call a one-stop shop. It provides tools to enhance risk management process for a corporation of any size, large, medium, small, in line with our anti-corruption law, our international anti-corruption law, which is the corruption of foreign public officials. And put very simply, if you're caught by that law and convicted, you can go to jail for up to 14 years, and you can be fined an unlimited amount of money. So a week ago yesterday, the first individual in Canada was charged, convicted, sentenced last Friday to 3 years in jail. We have had companies that have been fined $9.5 million for a less than $200,000 bribe, $10.5 million. So Canada is starting to actually convict people and sentence people and fine corporations. But this is available in a PDF format. It has all different sorts of elements of anti-bribery corruption management systems, and it creates value for businesses and for governments and NGOs that deal with those businesses. Now, this is the only pretty picture I would have shown you today, and that is the business integrity tool around which we build this checklist. And it has 6 steps to commit to an anti-corruption program from the top and all throughout your organization, to assess where you are already with regard to anti-corruption, to plan your program, and then to act on the program. We all know that it's wonderful to have books up on the shelf and have plans up on the shelf and have codes of conduct up on the shelf, but if you don't implement them, and then if you don't monitor them and report on them, they're not of any use to you, to your staff, or to the wider public. There are approximately 20 tools in this checklist. One of the tools that people like to use with clients is a one sheet. And on that sheet, it has 20 questions. And the answers are yes, no, partly, and planned. And these ask you questions with regard to your commitment to anti-corruption, your implementation, your monitoring and review, and your reporting. So it's really a bird's eye view onto your company and say, are we doing these things with regard to anti-corruption? One of the other tools in the 4th step, called ACT, is called the self-evaluation tool. This has 241 indicators. So now you're really getting down into all these aspects of your company and saying, are we doing these things? Are we planning them? Should we be planning? One of the things that Mr. Hoktanian wanted me to mention is the Corruption Perceptions Index. And Transparency International is probably most well known for this index. It's been published every year since mid-1990s. Last year, 177 countries were looked at, and this is the Corruption Perceptions Index. So we have to remember that corruption, again, is hard to prove, and it's often perceptions of people. So in last year's, Canada ranked number 9, number 1 being the best. We tied with Australia, and we had a score of 81 out of 100. Armenia ranked, can you guess, out of 177? 120? 85? 180. There weren't 185. 85 is the closest, actually. It ranked 94, and it tied with Algeria, Benin, Colombia, Djibouti, India, Philippines, and Suriname. And its score out of 100 was 30, 55, 25. Well, whoever said 30 in here, it was 36. So just since last year, we've changed the system, and you can actually compare year to year now. And so Canada, actually, we dropped 3 points. But Armenia improved by 2 points. So you're on the right path, absolutely. The other thing he wanted me to mention was a tool called the Global Corruption Barometer. And this is a survey, whereas the Corruption Perceptions Index, they go and survey experts from in the country, from outside of the country, and it really is a survey of surveys of The Economist and the Economic Intelligence Unit and the World Bank. The Global Corruption Barometer, they go to each country and they interview the people in that country. And these are their attitudes toward and their experience of corruption within their own country. So the first question asked was, over the past 2 years, how have the levels of corruption in Armenia changed? So 21% said it increased a lot in the last 2 years. Corruption increased a lot. 22% said it increased a little. So that's 43% feel that it's increased. 39% said it stayed the same. 16% says it's decreased a little bit, and 3% said it's decreased a lot. The second question was, what's the percentage of respondents who felt that institutions were corrupt or extremely corrupt in Armenia? So what institution do you think they said was the most corrupt? Police, courts? Custom tax, government, okay? You're all up in that area. So 68% said public officials and civil servants. 66 tied medical and health services and police. Pardon me, actually the highest one at 69% was judiciary. So they were considered the most. Then we had political parties and parliament and legislature at 57, and education systems 58, religious bodies or business at 51, religious bodies 39, media 37, and NGOs at 32. So nobody's clean, nobody looks great, not even NGOs, which shouldn't be a surprise to people. Have you or anyone in your household paid a bribe to one of the 8 following services? So 24% of the people said, we paid a bribe to the medical and health services. 18% said we paid it to the judiciary. 16 to registry and permit services. 12 to educational services. And that's what that gentleman was alluding to that teacher. Didn't you ever take money as a teacher for doing something in Armenia? That's, without saying it, that's what he was asking her. Tax revenues, land services, 9%. And utilities, interestingly enough, only 2% paid a bribe. In a lot of other countries, that would be higher because you pay a bribe to get a telephone put in or to get your water bill what it really should be, for example. The last question was, to what extent do you agree that ordinary people can make a difference in the fight against corruption? So how many people do you think in Armenia said, we strongly agree that the people can make a difference? 0. Oh. 12, 15? 10, 20? Okay. 6% said they strongly agree, and 31% said they agree. So that's 37% who feel there's hope for people making a difference. 41% said they disagree, and 22% said they strongly disagree. So we still have 63% of the people who feel disillusioned, perhaps we could say. And I'd just like to introduce quickly 2 other tools. And that's because patronage was an area that Mr. Hoktanian mentioned as corruption in Armenia. And there is a tool that TI developed in the mid-1990s called the Integrity Pact. And this is a tool that governments who are letting a contract, putting out a tender, and those companies that are bidding on that contract sign an agreement that they will not elicit or offer a bribe anywhere from the request for proposals right through to the implementation of the project. And it also contains all those sanctions that will come into play if it's discovered that there has been bribery along the way. This monitoring system is made up either of those companies that lost. They want to make sure that the company that won isn't somewhere down the road paying a bribe, you know. And also it could be civil society or an independent oversight body that is put in place. This has been used in hundreds and hundreds of situations around the world. Colombia uses it in all 3 levels of its government. Seoul, Korea, uses it in all of its government procurement projects for the city of Seoul and its 62 subsidiaries. In Nigeria, it's been used. The Schönefeld Airport, that's just being finished soon, we hope, in Germany, has also had an integrity pact as part of it. So it's not just the big S-South countries that they watch, it's all of us. I would love to have an integrity pact in Canada, so if any of you are business people out there and interested in this, I'd love to speak with you about it. And the other tool is the one that we just launched yesterday with our 3rd edition. And this is a self-e-learning tool. It's free. It's about an hour and a half to take it. We've produced it in both English and French. And it provides best practice anti-bribery training and enables companies to benchmark themselves against their own training program. And the learning outcomes from this e-learning program are what is bribery and why is it important? They're case scenarios, so you actually are there with people at customs, or you're on the telephone with somebody talking to their agent, and the agent is asking for special dispensations, and you're going to have to respond to those people. The bribery laws that are in place, so we have, as I mentioned, our Corruption of Foreign Public Officials Act. Many Canadian companies are also under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the States and the UK Bribery Act, so it depends on where your companies are listed. And it also tells you how you can report cases of bribery of which you come into contact. If you want to track or brand or adapt this training tool, then there is a fee, depending on the size of your company, but otherwise it's free. And again, you can access it through the checklist that's available on our homepage. So I've just given you a taste of corruption. I know you're going to hear about it a lot more today, but I hope you have a bit of an understanding of Transparency International and its role as the global coalition against corruption. Thank you.